The highway stretched endless beneath Cole Brennan's headlights, asphalt gleaming wet under the first kiss of sleet. February in the Rockies came mean and fast, but the weather report had promised light precipitation, maybe some icing above 8,000 feet. Nothing a man who'd driven these mountains his whole life couldn't handle. The vintage Corvette engine hummed in the truck bed behind him, wrapped in tarps and strapped down tight. $8,000 riding back their payment from a state senator who collected classic cars the way other men collected stamps. The kind of money that meant Cole could make his mortgage payment with 2 weeks to spare, buy Ruby new shoes without checking the account balance first. Maybe even sleep through the night without the knot of anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in his chest. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Martha's name glowed on the screen. Cole's hand moved toward it. It hesitated, then pulled back to the wheel as the truck's back end stepped out on a patch of black ice. Muscle memory took over hands steering into the skid, weight shifting back under control. The phone stopped buzzing, started again immediately. Martha never called twice unless something was wrong. Cole grabbed the phone, thumb swiping. The connection crackled, half static. Her voice came through broken. Ruby's fever spiking, 102, won't stop crying for daddy. Should she take her to urgent care? The words hit like a fist to the sternum. Cole's foot eased off the cross, mind already calculating. Turn around now, he'd be home in 90 minutes. But the senator's Corvette sat in a Denver garage waiting for the engine Cole had just spent 14 hours rebuilding. The man's assistant had been clear pickup before 9 tonight, or they'd call someone else, and good luck getting paid for parts and labor on a job you didn't finish. Ruby's fever could be nothing. Could be the flu making rounds at school. Could be something worse. The voice in his head whispered the one that sounded like every nightmare he'd lived through watching Julia waste away in a hospital bed. Cole's jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Through the static, he heard Ruby's small voice in the background calling for him, and the sound carved something out of his chest. He told Martha to give Ruby children's Tylenol, watch her clothes, call back if anything changed. Heard the doubt in Martha's silence before she agreed. The call dropped before he could say anything else. 60 miles ahead, the job waited. Behind him, his daughter needed him. And Cole sat trapped between them on a highway turning to ice, trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. The snow started 20 minutes later. 300 miles north, Natalie Cross stood at a floor-to-ceiling window in Atlantic Ventures' Seattle offices, watching night settle over Puget Sound. Behind her, 4 men in suits debated her future like she wasn't in the room. The merger documents sat on the conference table, 200 pages of legalese that would transform Crosstech AI from Natalie's creation into a subsidiary of Atlantic's empire. $42 million, 8 years of 80-hour weeks of sacrificed relationships and missed birthdays, and nights sleeping on her office couch because going home to an empty apartment felt worse than not going home at all. The Atlantic CEO, Harrison Webb, checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. His voice carried that particular edge wealthy men got when people made them wait. They needed to finalize this tonight. Tomorrow the market opened, and rumors were already circulating. Natalie's board had made it clear, close this deal or face a vote of no confidence. Atlantic's board had made it equally clear, sign the papers at Mountain Summit Resort tomorrow morning or they'd move to Crosstech's competitor by end of week. Natalie's assistant touched her elbow, voice low. The weather between Seattle and Mountain Summit Resort was deteriorating. They should leave now if they wanted to make the drive safely. Or postpone. Reschedule for next week when the storm system passed. Harrison Webb's laugh held no humor. Postpone, right, because $42 million deals just waited around for convenient weather. His eyes fixed on Natalie with the kind of cold appraisal that said he'd already calculated her replacement value. Natalie heard her own voice, calm and professional, agreeing to drive down tonight. She'd be at the resort by 10, ready to review final documents, sign at 9 sharp tomorrow morning. Harrison nodded, satisfied, already moving on to discuss quarterly projections with his CFO. Nobody asked if Natalie had doubts. Nobody wondered if she'd spent the last 3 months waking at 4 in the morning with her heart hammering, convinced she was having a heart attack, only to recognize the familiar tightness as another panic attack. Her therapist's voice echoed in her skull. Your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe you should listen. Natalie signed out of the building at 6:45, took the elevator down to the parking garage, and slid behind the wheel of the Lexus she'd rented that morning. Her own car, a Tesla she'd barely driven in the last year, sat in her assigned spot gathering dust. She couldn't remember the last time she'd gone anywhere that wasn't work-related. The navigation system calculated 4 hours to Mountain Summit Resort. Natalie pulled out of the garage into rain that was already trying to decide if it wanted to be snow. Her hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. On the passenger seat, her phone buzzed with Slack notifications. Emails flagged urgent, a text from her CFO about a product launch issue that needed her input. Natalie merged onto I-5 South and tried to remember when she'd last felt excited about any of it. The storm caught her 2 hours outside Seattle, right where the highway climbed into the Cascades. What had been rain an hour ago transformed into heavy wet snow that clung to the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Natalie's GPS cheerfully announced the weather conditions deteriorating, highway advisory in effect, drive with caution. The Lexus built for Seattle's rain-slicked streets started to feel fragile on a road turning to ice. Traffic thinned as other drivers made the smart choice, pulling off at towns with names Natalie didn't recognize, finding hotels to wait out the storm. She kept driving. In her head, Harrison Webb's voice reminded her that Atlantic had options, that Crosstech wasn't the only AI automation company worth acquiring, that Natalie Cross might be brilliant, but she wasn't irreplaceable. Her father had taught her that. Richard Montgomery, who'd built his first company from nothing and sold it for $60 million by the time Natalie was 10. Who'd looked at her MIT acceptance letter and said it was a good start. Who'd attended her graduate thesis defense and spent the reception telling investors how his daughter was going to revolutionize industrial automation. Who'd called her the day Crosstech's valuation hit $100 million and said he was proud. But don't get comfortable, the real players were valued in the billions. Natalie hadn't spoken to him in 6 months. Couldn't remember why exactly. The calls had just gotten harder to take, the expectations heavier to carry, until silence seemed easier than disappointment. The Lexus hit a patch of ice and fishtailed. Natalie's heart jumped into her throat, hands overcorrecting on the wheel. The car spun 90 degrees, headlights sweeping across a wall of trees before the back end slammed into a snowbank with a crunch of metal and plastic. For a long moment, Natalie just sat there, engine running, hazard lights automatically engaging, breathing hard. Her hands shook on the wheel. The airbags hadn't deployed. The car had come to rest at a 45-degree angle, nose pointed back onto the highway, rear end buried in snow. Through the windshield, she could see the road empty in both directions, could see the snow falling heavier now, accumulation visible. Natalie tried to reverse. The wheels spun uselessly. Tried rocking forward and back. The car just dug deeper, transmission whining in protest. Her phone showed 1 bar of signal. She pulled up her contact's thumb, hovering over the rental company's roadside assistance number. The signal dropped to nothing before the call connected. She tried 911. The call failed. The heater was still running, cabin warm, but Natalie could see the snow piling against the windows. Could feel the car settling deeper as the weight of accumulation pressed down. Could hear the absolute silence of a highway where no other cars were coming because everyone else had been smart enough to stop. She'd made it maybe 20 miles into the mountains, still 3 hours from Mountain Summit Resort, alone on a highway that was about to become impassable, in a car that wouldn't move, with a phone that couldn't call for help. Natalie's breath came shorter. The familiar tightness started in her chest, radiating up into her jaw. Not now, she thought. Please, not now. But panic didn't care about timing. Her therapist had taught her breathing exercises, grounding techniques, all useless when her nervous system decided she was dying. She closed her eyes, pressed her forehead to the steering wheel, and tried to count backwards from 100. Headlights appeared in her rearview mirror at 73. Cole saw the hazard lights half a mile out, twin orange pulses against the white. His first instinct was to keep driving. Someone else's problem, someone else's emergency. He had his own daughter to worry about, his own deadline crushing down. But Julia's voice whispered in his memory, the way it had in their last real conversation, before the morphine took her too far away for words. Take care of people, she'd said. Don't let this world make you hard. Cole eased the truck to a stop 20 feet back from the Lexus, killed the engine, pulled his Navy-issue cold weather jacket from behind the seat. The temperature outside had to be in the teens. Wind drove snow horizontal across the highway. He approached the driver's side, movements careful. Woman alone in a car, middle of nowhere. Strange man appearing out of a storm. Cole had learned in the service that how you approached someone mattered as much as what you said. She saw him through the window, eyes wide. He stopped 10 feet back, held up both hands, called out over the wind, asking if she was hurt, if she needed help. Keeping his distance, letting her see his face in the Lexus's dome light, making himself non-threatening. The door opened. She stepped out, and Cole's first thought was that she didn't belong here. Everything about her screamed city money boardroom. The coat was designer, the boots were leather, not built for snow. Her whole posture carried that particular tension of someone used to being in control discovering the control was an illusion. She was also clearly in pain, cradling her right wrist against her chest. Cole moved closer, saw the swelling already starting, and asked if she could move her fingers. She tried, winced, managed to flex them. Probably not broken, then maybe a bad sprain from the airbag or bracing against the dash. He had a first aid kit in the truck, could wrap it, but she needed a hospital. They both knew it. Her voice came out steady, despite the pain, asking if he had a phone that worked. Cole pulled his out, showed her the same no signal she'd been seeing, asked where she was headed. Mountain Summit Resort, for a meeting that started in less than 12 hours. Cole recognized the stubborn set of her jaw, seen it in the mirror often enough. The kind of determination that would walk on a broken leg rather than miss whatever finish line mattered. He assessed the Lexus, buried to the axle in frozen snow, back bumper crumpled. Even if they could dig it out, even if it would move, the roads were only getting worse. The resort was still 3 hours away in good conditions. These weren't good conditions. Cole told her the truth. She wasn't getting there tonight. Not in this car. Maybe not at all if the highway closed, which it probably would in the next hour. The woman's face went through several expressions. Disbelief, anger, resignation. She asked what he suggested. The resort was on Cole's route back to Maple Ridge, more or less. He'd already blown his timeline with Ruby. Another hour wouldn't change that. Mountain Summit would have rooms, food, heat. She could try to make her meeting. He could wait out the storm. Both of them would survive the night. She looked at him like he might be a serial killer. Cole understood that too. He gestured to his truck, to the commercial plates and the garage logo on the door. Told her his name, told her he had a daughter waiting at home who'd kill him if he left someone stranded in a blizzard. Saw the calculation in her eyes, the risk assessment. She asked what he wanted in return. The question caught him wrong. Cole felt something twist in his chest, something like anger and sadness mixed together. He didn't want anything. He was offering basic human decency because the alternative was leaving her to freeze. He turned to walk back to his truck. If she wanted to sit here and wait for help that wasn't coming, that was her choice. Her voice stopped him, quieter this time, asking him to wait. She grabbed a leather bag from the passenger seat, locked the Lexus with a button press that seemed wildly optimistic given the circumstances, and followed him through the snow. The truck's cab was warm heat still radiating from the vents. She climbed in, carefully cradling her wrist, pulled the door shut, made a small sound that might have been relief or pain or both. Cole put the truck in gear and eased back onto the highway. The back end slipped, caught, steadied. He could feel the road through the steering wheel, that sixth sense developed over thousands of miles, knowing where the ice lurked under the snow. She told him her name, Natalie, asked his. He'd already given it, but repeated it anyway. Cole. Told her to hang on, the next 20 miles were going to be rough. They were. The highway climbed through a pass that was more suggestion than road white on white, with only the occasional reflector post to mark where pavement ended and ravine began. The truck crawled along at 15 miles per hour, Cole's hands light on the wheel, letting the vehicle find its own way through the worst patches. Twice they slid sideways, momentum carrying them toward the edge before the tires caught and pulled them back. Natalie didn't make a sound, just gripped the handle above the door and stared straight ahead. Cole appreciated that. Screaming wouldn't help either of them. She asked what he did for a living. Cole told her he owned a garage. Small operation, mostly restoration work, some regular maintenance. Been doing it 10 years since he got out of the Navy. She asked if he was headed home now. Cole hesitated, then said yes. Had a daughter waiting. Ruby, 7 years old. She'd been sick earlier, nothing serious probably, but still. He should have been there. Natalie's voice gentled, asking why he wasn't. Cole's hands tightened on the wheel, because he'd had a job to finish, because the money mattered, because he was one man trying to do the work of two, and sometimes the timing just didn't line up right. Because 3 years ago, his wife had died and left him with a garage full of half-finished projects and a little girl who kept asking when mommy was coming home, and Cole still hadn't figured out how to be enough for both of them. He didn't say that last part out loud. Natalie asked if he'd been married. The past tense in her voice said she'd already guessed the answer. Cole confirmed it. 3 years widowed. Cancer. It had been fast at the end, which the doctors said was a mercy, though Cole couldn't see how watching someone you loved waste to nothing in 6 months counted as mercy. Natalie said she was sorry. The words came out automatic the way everyone's did. Cole said thanks and also automatic. They'd both participated in the required ritual of grief acknowledgement. The silence that followed felt less tense, like maybe they'd established they were both just people trying to get through a bad night. Mountain Summit Resort appeared through the snow like a mirage. Lights blazing in windows, cars packed into the lot, smoke rising from chimneys. Cole had never been so glad to see a building in his life. The lot was chaos. Every spot taken, people moving between vehicles and the entrance, everyone with the same idea. Get inside, get warm, wait out the storm. Cole found a space near the back, killed the engine. The sudden silence felt loud. Natalie looked at him. Said thanks felt insufficient. Cole shrugged. Said it was fine. She needed to get that wrist looked at. Maybe they had ice inside. They ran for the entrance, heads down against the wind. The lobby hit them like a wall of noise and warmth. 50 people at minimum, maybe more. Families with children, couples, solo travelers, all wearing the same expression of relieved exhaustion. The front desk was under siege, a kid who couldn't be more than 20, trying to field demands and questions and complaints while maintaining professional composure. Cole and Natalie joined the line. It moved slowly, very slowly. The conversations around them painted a picture. Highway closed behind them. No rooms available. Some people had reservations, some didn't. All of them were stuck here for the foreseeable future. The kid at the desk looked ready to cry, repeating the same information over and over. No availability, completely booked, restaurant and lobby open. No, he didn't know when the roads would clear. No, he couldn't just make rooms appear. Cole's phone buzzed. Signal had returned. He pulled it out, saw 7 missed calls from Martha. His stomach dropped. Hit redial, heard Martha's voice tight with worry. Ruby's fever was down. Tylenol had worked. She'd fallen asleep an hour ago asking for Daddy. Martha said she'd stay the night if Cole was still on the road. Her tone said she knew he'd made the wrong choice, but loved him too much to say it outright. Cole sagged against the wall, relief making his legs weak. Told Martha he'd be home as soon as the highway opened. Thanked her. Ended the call and found Natalie watching him. She asked if his daughter was okay. Cole nodded, said she was fine. Just missed him. The words tasted like failure. They reached the desk after 30 minutes. The kid looked like he wanted to climb through the computer screen and escape. Natalie gave her name, said she had a reservation. Suite 412. The kid's fingers flew over the keyboard. His expression shifted from haunted to merely exhausted. Yes, Ms. Cross. Premium suite, Mountain View confirmed. He glanced at Cole, asked if this guest was checking in with her. Cole started to say no. Started to say he'd find a chair in the lobby, wait out the storm, drive home in the morning. Natalie spoke first. Said yes. The kid processed it without comment. Professional to the end, handed over key cards, directed them to the elevator. Natalie took the cards, looked at Cole, told him there were 2 bedrooms. He'd saved her life. Least she could do was offer him a real bed instead of a lobby chair. Cole should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept distance. But he was tired and worried about Ruby, and the thought of a real bed called to something deep and desperate. He said okay, said thank you. They took the elevator in silence. Suite 412 was excessive. That was Cole's first coherent thought when Natalie unlocked the door. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, or what would be the valley once the snow stopped turning the world white. Stone fireplace, already burning. Someone must have started it before they arrived. Leather furniture that probably cost more than Cole's truck. Kitchenette with a bar. 2 doors leading to separate bedrooms. Cole told Natalie he'd take the smaller one. She shrugged out of her coat, said take whichever. He grabbed his duffel and headed right. The bedroom held a king bed with more pillows than seemed necessary. Cole dropped his bag, pulled out his phone, texted Martha that he was safe and would call Ruby in the morning. Stared at the screen for a moment, then typed out another message to Brooke, his partner, at the garage. Told him about the storm, about being stuck, asked him to call the senator's office first thing and explain. Brooke's response came back in seconds. A string of profanity followed by stay safe, I got it. When Cole came back out, Natalie stood at the window staring into white. She'd kicked off her boots. They sat by the door, probably cost more than Cole's mortgage payment. She looked smaller without the executive armor. Just a person watching a storm. Cole moved to the kitchenette, started opening cabinets. Found a bottle of whiskey that definitely cost triple digits, found 2 glasses. Poured 2 fingers into each, carried one to Natalie. She took it without looking away from the window. Said thanks. They stood there in silence, drinking. Outside, the storm tried to bury the world. Inside, the fire crackled, and 2 strangers tried to figure out what came next. Natalie asked what his story was, besides single dad with a broken truck and a blizzard. Cole said that pretty much covered it. Mechanic shop owner father. That was the list. She pushed. Told him everyone had more than that. So Cole told her about buying the garage with Julia before she got sick, about building it into something that mattered, about the last 2 years watching it slowly bleed customers because he couldn't be in 2 places at once, couldn't give it the attention it needed while also being present for Ruby, about the debt that just kept growing, about Thorne Caldwell who wanted the land and didn't care what he had to destroy to get it. Natalie listened, really listened, then told him about Cross Tech, about starting it in her apartment with $6,000 and a belief that she could change how factories operated, about the 80-hour weeks, the near bankruptcies, the slow climb to success, about the merger that would make her rich beyond anything she'd imagined as a kid, about how none of it felt like winning anymore. Cole asked why she was doing it then. Natalie's laugh came out hollow. Because her board expected it, because her investors demanded it, because walking away would mean admitting 8 years was wasted, because she'd built her entire identity around being CEO Natalie Cross and didn't know who she was without the title. Cole poured them both another drink, asked when she'd last been happy, not successful, actually happy. Natalie opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, said she couldn't remember. The confession hung between them. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned low. They talked until after 2 in the morning, about childhoods and dreams and the gap between who they'd wanted to be and who they'd become, about loss and loneliness and the particular ache of going through motions that used to have meaning. Natalie told him about her father, about standards she could never quite meet. Cole told her about Julia's last words, about promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Somewhere around 3, Cole noticed they'd migrated to the couch, sitting close enough to feel warmth, not quite touching. Natalie's eyes were closing despite the conversation. Cole suggested they both get some sleep. Natalie agreed, stood up, swayed slightly. Cole caught her elbow, steadied her. She looked at him, really looked. Something shifted in her expression. Told him thanks. For the ride, for listening, for not treating her like a CEO who had all the answers. Cole said anytime. Meant it. They went to their separate rooms. Cole lay in the oversized bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a woman with tired eyes and $42 million on the line. About how she'd looked standing at the window, small and lost. About how talking to her had felt like the first real conversation he'd had in 3 years. His phone glowed on the nightstand. No messages. Ruby was safe with Martha. The garage could survive one more day. The world wouldn't end because Cole took a few hours for himself. He fell asleep thinking about Natalie's question. When had he last been happy? Couldn't remember that either. Morning came with silence. Cole woke to the absence of wind, the absence of that constant howling that had been the soundtrack to everything. Sat up disoriented before his brain caught up. Resort, sweet, Natalie. He checked his phone. 7:30. Still no signal, but the Wi-Fi worked. Pulled up the weather. Storm had passed. Highway still closed, crews working to clear it. Estimated reopening noon at earliest. Cole got dressed, opened his bedroom door. The suite was empty. Natalie's door stood open, bed made with military precision. The fire had burned down to embers. The main door clicked. Natalie walked in carrying 2 paper cups and a bag that smelled like heaven. She'd showered, changed clothes, looked more like herself. The CEO armor back in place. Told him she'd gone to the lobby. Cell service was still dead, road still closed. Front desk clerk looked ready for a breakdown, but the kitchen was making breakfast. Cole took the offered coffee, asked when she'd gotten up. 5:30, couldn't sleep. Old habit. They ate pastries standing at the counter. Natalie scrolled through her phone even though the no signal icon mocked her. Habit, probably. Cole understood. He kept checking his own phone, too. Natalie's screen lit up, email notification through the Wi-Fi. Cole watched her face change as she read, watched color drain out, watched something like horror creep in, asked what was wrong. She turned the laptop so he could see. Email from Harrison Webb. Subject line, final notice. Body text, 3 sentences. Natalie had missed the meeting. Atlantic was moving forward with Crosstech's primary competitor. The deal was dead. Below that, another email from her board. Emergency meeting requested. Questions about her judgment. Concerns about her leadership. Veiled threats about votes of no confidence. Natalie closed the laptop. Her hands shook. Cole said he was sorry. Meant it. She said it was fine. Voice flat. Everything she'd worked for gone because of weather she couldn't control. But sure. Fine. Cole recognized the edge of breakdown when he saw it. The way grief or rage or despair built up behind the eyes looking for a crack to escape through. He asked what she wanted to do. Natalie laughed, sharp and brittle. What could she do? Drive back to Seattle, grovel to the board, try to salvage something from the wreckage, spend the next 6 months proving she deserved to keep running the company she'd built, or what Cole said it quietly, or walk away, just be done, let it go. Natalie stared at him like he'd suggested she set herself on fire, asked if he was serious. Walk away from 8 years of her life, from a company worth $180 million, from the only identity she had. Cole said yeah, if it was killing her, if she woke up every day dreading it, if the panic attacks were her body screaming for her to stop. Why not walk away? Natalie's eyes were shining, not crying, not yet, but close. She asked what she'd do instead, who she'd be. Cole said he didn't know, but she'd be alive, present, here. That had to count for something. Natalie sat down hard on the couch, stared at her laptop like it might have answers it didn't contain. Cole poured more coffee, waited, let her process. Finally, she opened the laptop again, started typing. Cole watched her face, saw determination replace desperation, saw her shoulders straighten. She hit send, closed the laptop, looked at him, said she just resigned as CEO, effective immediately. Leave of absence indefinite. The board could figure out the rest. Cole asked if she was sure. Natalie said no, said she was terrified, said she had no idea what happened next. But she was done. Done sacrificing herself for other people's expectations. Done measuring worth in stock prices and merger deals. Done being so successful, she forgot how to be happy. Cole said, okay then. Natalie started laughing, couldn't seem to stop. Great gasping laughs that might have been bombs. Cole sat next to her, didn't touch, just present, while she fell apart and put herself back together. When she finally stopped, she asked what he was going to do. His garage, his daughter, his life waiting back home. Cole said he'd go back, face Thorne Caldwell again, figure out how to make the numbers work, keep trying, asked if that was enough. Cole thought about it, said he didn't know, but it was what he had. Natalie nodded. They sat there on the expensive couch in the expensive suite, 2 people who just made decisions they couldn't take back. Outside, the snow had stopped. Sun broke through clouds, turning everything to diamonds. The storm was over. The roads would open. They'd both go back to their lives. But something had shifted. In the space of one impossible night, talking to a stranger while the world tried to bury them both had glimpsed a different way forward. Cole's phone buzzed. Martha. The highway was opening. She'd bring Ruby to meet him at the garage around 2. The little girl was asking for him. Natalie's phone lit up too. Her CFO, her board, her whole life demanding answers she didn't have yet. They looked at each other. The moment held. Natalie asked where he was going now. Cole said home. Maple Ridge, about 90 miles south. She asked if she could see it. His town, his life. The place that made someone stop in a blizzard for a stranger. Cole hesitated, warned her he had a daughter who'd been through enough loss, who didn't need people wandering in and out of her life. Natalie said she understood, said she just wanted to see where he was from. Then she'd figure out her next step. Cole agreed. One day, one visit. Then Natalie would decide what came next. They checked out, loaded into Cole's truck. The parking lot was organized chaos, everyone leaving at once, desperate to get home. Cole navigated through it, got onto the highway heading south. Behind them, Mountain Summit Resort disappeared into distance. Ahead, Maple Ridge waited. And sitting between them in the truck cab, unspoken but undeniable, was the knowledge that neither of them would be the same person they'd been before the storm. Maple Ridge appeared through the windshield like something from a postcard nobody bothered to send anymore. Main Street stretched 3 blocks brick buildings from the 20s, still standing mom-and-pop shops that somehow survived when the rest of America went corporate. Population sign at the town limits read 3,400, and Cole suspected that number was optimistic. The kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did, where your mistakes followed you to the grocery store, where people still waved from passing cars. Cole pulled the truck onto Oak Street, past the hardware store and the diner that served breakfast all day. Natalie sat forward, taking it in. Her expression was careful, like she was trying to decode a language she'd never learned. She asked if he'd grown up here. Cole shook his head. Grew up 2 towns over, came here for Julia. She'd inherited her grandmother's house, small place on the east side. They'd bought the garage together back when optimism was easier to come by. Built something from nothing. Then cancer took her and left Cole holding pieces he still didn't know how to put back together. He turned onto Spruce, pulled into the driveway of a 2-story Craftsman that had seen better decades. Paint peeling on the trim front steps needed replacing, yards showed evidence of a 7-year-old who considered grass optional. Home, such as it was. Martha's sedan sat in the driveway. Cole's chest loosened seeing it. Ruby was here. Safe. He told Natalie to wait. Needed to handle this part alone. She nodded, understanding. Cole climbed the steps, key already out. The door opened before he touched the knob. Ruby launched herself at him, small arms around his waist, face buried in his jacket. 7 years old, but felt smaller somehow, like she'd shrunk in his absence. Her voice came muffled against his chest, asking where he'd been. Why he hadn't come home. If he was leaving like Mommy did. The words drove through Cole's ribs like a blade. He dropped to his knees, held her tight, told her no. Never. The storm trapped him, but he was here now. He'd always come back to her. Always. Ruby pulled away enough to look at his face, her eyes. Julia's eyes searched for lies, found none. She asked if he promised. Cole promised. Martha appeared in the doorway, relief and reproach mixed in her expression. She'd been worried. The fever breaking helped, but Ruby had woken twice in the night, crying for Daddy. Asked if Cole knew what that did to a child already terrified of abandonment. Cole absorbed it, deserved it, thanked Martha for staying. Walked her to her car, handed her cash. She tried to refuse. Watched her drive away before turning back to find Ruby on the front steps staring at the truck. Asking who the lady was. Natalie had gotten out, was stretching road-stiff muscles. Even in jeans and a sweater, she looked out of place here. Too polished, too careful. Ruby's gaze was pure 7-year-old suspicion. Cole made introductions. Ruby, this was Natalie, someone he'd helped during the storm. She was visiting for the day. Natalie, his daughter Ruby. Natalie offered a small wave. Ruby didn't wave back, asked if Natalie was Daddy's girlfriend. Cole felt heat climb his neck. No, just a friend, someone who needed help. Ruby's expression said she knew when adults were lying, but would let it slide for now. Told Natalie she had a dinosaur collection if Natalie wanted to see it. Well, not dinosaurs anymore, rockets, space stuff. Because Ruby was going to be an astronaut and dinosaurs were cool, but rockets went to space. Natalie's smile looked genuine. Said she'd helped design guidance systems for satellites once. Did that count? Ruby's entire demeanor shifted. Really, what kind of satellites? Communication or weather or GPS? And just like that, Natalie was being led inside by a child who 30 seconds ago had been ready to defend her territory. Cole followed, watching Natalie crouch down to Ruby's level, listening like the 7-year-old's explanation of orbital mechanics actually mattered. The house looked like a single father lived there. Dishes in the sink, laundry basket on the couch. Ruby's homework scattered across the kitchen table. Cole started cleaning on autopilot, embarrassment warring with exhaustion. Natalie waved him off, said she'd seen worse. Sat at the table while Ruby brought down her entire collection of model rockets, each one explained in detail that would have made NASA proud. Cole made coffee, watched them, felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not quite peace, maybe the memory of what peace used to feel like. His phone buzzed. Brooke, texting that the senator's office called they'd rescheduled pickup for Monday, no penalty. Small miracle. Also, Thorne Caldwell's lawyer dropped off another letter. Brooke hadn't opened it, but knew what it said. Same thing it always said. Sell or else. Cole pocketed the phone. Dealt with that later. Right now, Ruby was showing Natalie her drawings of Mars colonies, and Natalie was asking questions that made Ruby's face light up. The afternoon slipped away easier than it should have. Ruby insisted on demonstrating her rocket launch in the backyard, a model that went maybe 50 feet up before the parachute deployed. Natalie clapped like she'd witnessed actual spaceflight. Ruby preened. Cole stood on the porch watching, thinking about how long it had been since his daughter looked this happy. Later, after grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, after Ruby's bath, and the negotiation about bedtime, after the story and the tucking in, and the ritual of saying goodnight to Mommy's photo on the nightstand, Cole came back downstairs to find Natalie studying family pictures on the mantel. Julia smiled out from silver frames. Wedding day, Ruby's birth. A candid shot from the garage's grand opening. Frozen moments from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Natalie asked if it got easier. Cole considered lying. Settled on truth. Some days yes, some days no. Some days he forgot Julia was gone, reached for the phone to tell her something remembered halfway through dialing. Some days Ruby did something that was pure Julia and Cole had to leave the room to breathe. Some days were just days. Natalie nodded, said her mother died when she was 16. Heart attack, stress-induced. Her father had built a company that consumed everything, including his marriage, his health, his humanity. Her mother paid the price. And Natalie spent the next 20 years becoming exactly what killed her. The confession hung in the air between them. Cole asked if that's why she walked away this morning. Natalie said maybe, or maybe she just finally hit her limit. Either way, she didn't want to be CEO of a company she'd stopped believing in. Didn't want to wake up at 36 and realize she'd sacrificed everything for nothing that mattered. She asked if she could stay. Not here in his house. In town, a week, maybe two. Rent a room, figure out next steps. She needed space from Seattle, from the board, from the wreckage of the deal. Needed to remember what normal life looked like before deciding what came next. Cole's first instinct was no. Too complicated, too risky, too close to his daughter's heart. But looking at Natalie, seeing the same lost expression he wore in the mirror most mornings, the no wouldn't come. He told her Clara's B&B had rooms, 2 blocks over reasonable rates. Clara was nosy but kind. Natalie could stay there, be in town, take whatever time she needed. Asked if she was sure about this. Walking away from everything. Starting over in a place she'd been for 3 hours. Natalie's laugh carried no humor. Sure, no. Terrified, absolutely. But for the first time in 8 years, she felt like she could breathe. That had to mean something. Cole understood that better than he wanted to admit. He drove her to Clara's B&B as the sun dropped behind the Rockies. Clara took one look at Natalie, at Cole, and her matchmaking instincts activated with the subtlety of an avalanche. She had a lovely room available, quiet mountain view, breakfast included. Asked how long Natalie planned to stay. Natalie said she wasn't sure yet. A week to start. Clara's smile widened, said a week was perfect. Gave Cole a look that promised interrogation later. In the truck driving home, Cole's phone rang. Brooks' name on the screen. He answered on speaker. Brooks' voice came tight. They had a problem. Big one. Someone had broken into the garage overnight. Cut locks, smashed the window. Tools, missing, equipment damaged. Police were there now, taking statements. Cole's hands clenched on the wheel. Asked how bad. Bad enough, maybe 15,000 and tools gone. Hydraulic lifts, sabotage fluid everywhere. Spray paint on the wall. Message said, sell or else. Cole felt rage build behind his ribs. Thorne. Had to be. The man wanted the property, didn't care what he destroyed to get it. Brooks said the cops would investigate, but they both knew how that would go. No witnesses, no evidence, nothing prosecutable. Just vandalism and threats. Cole told Brooke to document everything, file the report, call the insurance company. He'd be there in 20 minutes. Hung up, sat in the driveway, engine running, trying to breathe through anger that wanted to become violence. Natalie's voice cut through, asked what happened. Cole told her about Thorne Caldwell, real estate developer with political connections and questionable ethics. About the offers to buy the garage property, each one higher than the last. About Cole's refusals, about Julia's memory, tied up in those walls, about not letting some corporate shark erase what they'd built. About Thorne apparently deciding if Cole wouldn't sell willingly, he'd make keeping the place impossible. Natalie asked what Cole was going to do. Cole's jaw ached from clenching. Drive to the garage, survey the damage, figure out if he could afford to rebuild or if this was the hit that finally broke him. Natalie said she was coming with him. Cole started to argue. This wasn't her problem. She didn't need to be dragged into small-town drama. Her expression stopped him. Told him she knew corporate warfare. Knew how men like Thorne operated. Maybe she could help. Cole was too tired to refuse. The garage sat on the corner of Main and 5th brick building from the 40s that Cole and Julia had renovated themselves. The sign still read Brennan and Company in letters they'd painted together. Now the front window was smashed glass scattered across the sidewalk. Police cruiser parked outside, lights off. Brooks' truck next to it. Cole pulled in, killed the engine. Sat for a moment staring at the damage. Every scar on that building represented hours of his and Julia's labor. Represented dreams they'd built together. Represented the only inheritance Ruby would have. Now someone had violated it, tried to take it from them. He got out. Natalie followed. Inside was worse. The hydraulic lift they'd saved for a year to buy sat useless fluid pooled underneath. Toolboxes emptied, the expensive equipment gone. Spray paint covered the back wall in letters 3 feet high. Sell or else. Brooks stood talking to a deputy Cole recognized. Young guy meant well, wouldn't accomplish anything. The deputy was saying they'd file a report check for prints, ask around. His tone said he knew it wouldn't matter. Cole walked the space cataloging damage. 15,000 in tools, 12 in lift repairs, plus the window, the cleanup, the lost work time. 30,000 minimum. Insurance might cover half if they didn't call it vandalism and deny the claim. 30,000 he didn't have. On top of the 65,000 already owed. On top of the mortgage and the bills and Ruby's needs. He'd been treading water. This might finally pull him under. Natalie was examining the spray paint, taking photos with her phone. She asked if there were security cameras. Brooks said no. Couldn't afford them. Natalie nodded, pulled out her laptop, opened it on the workbench that hadn't been destroyed. Started typing. Called out questions. When did this happen? What time did Brooke lock up? Were there any witnesses? Brooke answered each one. Locked up at 6:30, same as always. Place was fine then. Discovered the break-in when he opened at 7 this morning. No witnesses he knew of, but old man Patterson across the street sometimes sat on his porch late. Might have seen something. Natalie made notes. Asked about Thorne's previous attempts. Letters, offers, threats. Cole and Brooke filled her in. 3 years of escalating pressure. Started with reasonable offers, evolved into legal threats, now this. She asked if they'd kept documentation. Brooke disappeared into the office, came back with a file folder. Every letter from Thorne's lawyers, every offer, every threat. Organized by date because Brooke was obsessive about paperwork. Natalie spread them on the workbench, took photos of each one, cross-referenced dates with property records she pulled up online, built a timeline that showed clear pattern. Thorne bought every property on the block except Cole's, made offers above market value, used legal pressure when offers failed, now moved to vandalism. She said they could use this. Show harassment, establish pattern, make it expensive for Thorne to keep pushing. Cole asked how. Natalie looked up from the laptop. Her eyes held something sharp. Said she'd spent 8 years fighting corporate battles. Knew how to hurt people who thought money made them untouchable. Asked if Cole wanted her help or if he'd rather handle it himself. Cole considered his options. Pride versus practicality, going down swinging versus accepting assistance. Thought about Ruby, about keeping the garage for her, about not letting Thorne win. Told Natalie he'd take any help she offered. Natalie smiled, not warm, predatory, said good. They'd start by installing security cameras, commercial-grade motion-activated cloud backup. She'd cover the cost as an investment. Then they'd document everything, build a case, make Thorne's lawyers work for their money. Brooke asked why she was doing this. She didn't even live here. Natalie's smile softened, said maybe she was tired of watching bullies win, or maybe she needed a project that actually mattered. Either way, she was in. The next week blurred. Natalie moved into Clara's B&B and proceeded to treat Cole's problem like a hostile takeover defense. She installed 6 cameras around the garage systems that would send alerts to all their phones if anyone approached after hours. She organized the documentation. Brooke had kept built spreadsheets that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. She interviewed neighbors, collected statements, found 3 people who'd witnessed Thorne's crew casing the garage the night before the break-in. She also started showing up at the garage daily, not to work on Cole's case, to work on actual cars. Turned out 8 years running an automation company taught you about mechanical systems. Natalie couldn't rebuild an engine, but she could diagnose electrical issues, could run computer diagnostics, could handle the paperwork that 8 hours of Brooke's day. She organized the shop, implemented scheduling software, created an online presence that started bringing customers from neighboring towns. Cole watched her transform his struggling business into something functional and didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. Ruby adored her. That was the real danger. His daughter, who'd been suspicious that first day, had decided Natalie was the most interesting person in Maple Ridge. Started asking when Natalie was coming over, started showing off her rocket designs, started gravitating toward Natalie like a planet-finding orbit. Cole should have stopped it, should have maintained boundaries. But watching Ruby laugh, watching her engage with someone who treated her intelligence as given rather than cute, watching her bloom under attention from someone who genuinely cared, he couldn't bring himself to interfere. 2 weeks became 3. Natalie showed no signs of leaving. Cole stopped expecting her to. They fell into routine. Mornings at the garage, Natalie helping with the work while Cole and Brooke handled repairs. Afternoons, she'd disappear to her laptop, managing whatever remained of her obligations to Crosstech. Evenings, she'd show up at Cole's house for dinner, Ruby's insistence overriding any objections. They didn't talk about what they were doing, didn't label it, just existed in the space between friendship and something more, both too scared to name it. 3 weeks and Cole took Ruby to school and came back to find Natalie already at the garage, staring at her laptop like it had personally offended her. He asked what was wrong. She turned the screen. Email from her board. They'd appointed an interim CEO. Were requesting she officially step down from the board of directors. Her ownership stake remained, but her influence was done. Cole waited for her reaction. Anger, grief, something. Natalie closed the laptop, said she'd expected it, walked away from the company, couldn't be surprised when the company walked away from her. Asked if it was supposed to hurt this much. Cole thought about Julia, about how grief lived in your bones long after you thought you'd made peace with loss. About how letting go of one version of yourself to become someone new felt like dying even when you chose it. He said, yeah, it was supposed to hurt, meant it mattered. Natalie nodded, went back to work, didn't mention it again. That night after dinner, after Ruby went to bed, they sat on Cole's porch watching stars emerge. Natalie asked if he thought she'd made a mistake. Cole said he didn't know, asked if she regretted it. She considered that, said no. She missed the work sometimes. Missed the clarity of problems that had solutions. But she didn't miss the panic. Didn't miss waking up feeling like she was drowning. Didn't miss being so successful she forgot how to be human. Cole said that sounded like progress then. Natalie's laugh came quiet, asked what happened next. She couldn't stay in Maple Ridge forever. Eventually she'd need to figure out a real plan. But every time she tried to imagine what came after, her mind went blank. Cole understood that. After Julia died, he'd spent a year unable to see past the next hour. Future was this vast thing that required hope he couldn't access. Only Ruby kept him moving forward. He asked what Natalie wanted, not what she should do, what she actually wanted. She was quiet for a long time. Finally said she wanted to wake up without dread. Wanted work that felt meaningful. Wanted people in her life who saw her as more than a resume. Wanted to belong somewhere. Cole's chest tightened. Wanted to tell her she already belonged here. That Ruby asked about her constantly. That the garage ran smoother with her there. That he'd started looking forward to evenings on this porch talking about nothing and everything. Said it sounded like she was figuring it out. Natalie looked at him. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Possibility. His phone shattered the moment. Martha. Ruby was running a fever again. 103. Should she bring her to urgent care? Cole's world narrowed to panic. Told Martha he was on his way. Sprinted for his truck. Natalie followed without asking, climbed in the passenger seat. They reached Martha's in 8 minutes. Ruby was crying flushed, saying her chest hurt. Cole scooped her up, felt the heat radiating through her pajamas. Got her in the truck, Natalie already looking up the nearest ER on her phone. 20-minute drive that took 12. Ruby whimpered in Cole's arms. He held her, murmured reassurance he didn't feel. Tried not to remember another night 3 years ago when Julia had spiked a fever that turned out to be her body shutting down. The ER took them immediately. Pediatric assessment vitals doctor asking questions. Ruby's fever was dropping with Tylenol, but the chest pain concerned them. They wanted to run tests. EKG blood work, chest x-ray. Cole signed consent forms with shaking hands. They moved Ruby to an exam room. Attached monitors. She looked so small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires, turning his daughter into a patient. Cole held her hand while nurses drew blood. Watched the monitor, terrified every time a number changed. Natalie stood against the wall, out of the way, but present. When they took Ruby for x-rays when Cole couldn't follow, she sat next to him in the waiting room. Didn't offer platitudes, just there. An hour passed. 2, a doctor appeared, expression serious, asked to speak with Cole privately. Cole's stomach dropped, told the doctor anything she needed to say could be said in front of Natalie. The doctor's gaze flicked between them, said Ruby had a congenital heart defect, long QT syndrome, genetic usually inherited, cause abnormal heart rhythms, could be managed but needed treatment. Ruby would need an implantable device, surgery within 2 weeks, cost $82,000, insurance covered $48,000. Cole heard the numbers like they were coming from underwater. $34,000, on top of the garage repairs, on top of everything else. $34,000 he absolutely didn't have. The doctor was still talking, outlining treatment plans, discussing specialists, explaining risks. Cole nodded like he understood while his brain calculated impossible math. He'd have to sell the garage. Only option. Thorne would buy it, Cole could pay for Ruby's surgery, find work somewhere else. Starting over at 42 with a daughter who needed him and a dead wife whose memory he'd just sold. But Ruby came first. Always. The doctor left. Cole sat with his head in his hands. Natalie asked what he was thinking. Cole told her. About the only choice that wasn't really a choice. About calling Thorne tomorrow or accepting whatever offer still stood. About losing the last piece of Julia but saving their daughter. About how he'd failed at being enough for both of them. Natalie's voice cut through, asked if he'd considered other options. Cole laughed bitter. What options? He was $65,000 in debt before this. $34,000 more might as well be $1 million. Natalie said she could help. Cole's head snapped up. Told her no, absolutely not. He wouldn't take her money. She pushed back, said it wasn't charity, business investment. She'd put in $35,000, take 15% equity in the garage. Standard deal. The money would cover Ruby's surgery. He'd keep the business. She'd have a stake in something real. Cole said she was out of her mind. The garage was worth maybe $100,000 on a good day. 15% equity for $35,000 was ridiculous. Natalie's expression didn't change. Said those were her terms. They stared at each other. Cole's pride warred with Ruby's needs. Warred with the knowledge that this was the lifeline he'd been drowning for. He asked why. Why throw money at a failing garage in a town she'd been in for 3 weeks? Why tie herself to his problems? Natalie's answer came quiet. Because Ruby deserved a chance to grow up. Because Cole had stopped for a stranger in a blizzard when he had every reason to keep driving. Because maybe this was what love looked like. Using resources to protect people who mattered. The word love hung between them. Cole wanted to argue, wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to be the man who solved his own problems. But Ruby was in a hospital bed with a heart defect, and pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. He said, okay, $25,000, 10% equity. Final offer, Natalie countered, $30,000, 12%. Take it or she'd go higher. Cole's laugh surprised him. Said she was terrible at negotiations. Natalie smiled. Said she knew exactly what she was doing. They shook on it. Partners. Ruby's surgery was scheduled for 10 days out. The specialist was confident, the prognosis good. She'd need the device, would need monitoring, but she'd live a normal life. Run, play, eventually go to space if that's what she wanted. Cole took her home the next day. Tucked her into her own bed, sat beside her while she slept. Watched her chest rise and fall, steady rhythm of life continuing. Natalie had saved his daughter, had saved his business, had somehow in 3 weeks become essential to both their lives. Cole didn't know what to do with that information. The next morning, Thorne Caldwell's black SUV pulled up to the garage. The man himself emerged, tailored suit and shark smile. 2 lawyers flanked him. Cole was under a Honda changing oil. Heard voices slid out, found Thorne examining the new security cameras. Thorne's smile widened. Said he'd heard about the unfortunate break-in. Terrible thing, vandalism. If Cole had just accepted one of the previous offers, he wouldn't have to worry about security. Cole wiped his hands on a rag, said he wasn't selling. Thorne's expression shifted. Friendly mask slipping, said Cole should reconsider. The property value would only go down. The neighborhood was changing. The garage was the last holdout. Eventually, Cole would sell. Question was whether he'd get anything for it or lose everything first. Cole said he'd take his chances. Thorne stepped closer, voice dropping, said he knew about Ruby's medical bills, knew about the debt, knew Cole was barely keeping his head above water. Made a new offer, $400,000 for the property, more than generous, enough to pay every bill and have something left over. All Cole had to do was walk away from the building Julia died trying to save. Cole felt rage build, felt his hands clench, felt violence pull at the edges of his control. Natalie's voice cut through. She'd appeared from the office laptop under her arm, asked who they were talking to. Cole introduced Thorne. Natalie's expression went cold and professional, the CEO mask sliding into place. She asked if Thorne was the one who vandalized their property. Thorne's lawyer stepped forward, started making noises about slander and proof. Natalie ignored them, told Thorne she'd reviewed the documentation, had statements from witnesses, had security footage from neighboring businesses showing his crew casing the garage. She'd built a case that would cost him millions in legal fees even if he won. She suggested he leave, permanently, or she'd make his life expensive. Thorne studied her, asked who she thought she was. Natalie smiled, said she used to run a company worth $180 million, used to negotiate with people who ate sharks like him for breakfast. She knew exactly how to hurt someone who thought money made them untouchable. She had resources, had time, had motivation. The question was whether Thorne wanted to find out what she'd do with them. The silence stretched. Thorne's lawyers were whispering, probably running risk assessment, probably realizing this wasn't the easy target they'd assumed. Thorne's smile returned, colder now, told Natalie she'd made a mistake, told Cole he'd regret this, left without another word. Brooke emerged from under a lift, said that was either the stupidest or bravest thing he'd ever seen. Natalie shrugged, said she was tired of watching bullies win. Cole looked at her, this woman who'd walked away from millions to find herself, who'd landed in his town by accident, who'd just threatened a man with enough power to make life very difficult, who'd done it to protect Cole and Ruby without hesitation. He said they needed to talk. Tonight, after Ruby was asleep. Natalie agreed. The day crawled. Ruby came home from school, energy already returning. She showed Natalie more rocket designs, asked when the surgery was, asked if she'd still be able to go to space with a device in her chest. Natalie said absolutely. Astronauts had all kinds of medical conditions. They just had to be managed properly. Ruby accepted this, went back to her drawings. Evening came. Ruby ate dinner, took her bath, went to bed with minimal protest. Cole tucked her in, kissed her forehead, promised he'd be there when she woke up. Came downstairs to find Natalie on the porch. Stars overhead, air crisp with spring pretending to arrive. Cole sat beside her. They'd done this so many nights now, it felt like ritual. He said he needed to know what she was doing, not just helping with the garage or Ruby's surgery, what she was building here. Natalie was quiet, then said she didn't know, had come for a day, stayed for a month. Somewhere in there stopped being a visitor and started being something else. She liked it here, liked the work that felt real, liked people who valued her for more than her resume, liked waking up without panic, liked Ruby's laugh and Brooke's terrible jokes and Clara's invasive questions, liked Cole. The confession hung between them. Cole said he liked her too. More than made sense for 3 weeks. But Ruby had already lost her mother. He couldn't let her get attached to someone who'd leave. Natalie turned to face him, asked, what if she didn't leave? What if she stayed, really stayed, not as a visitor or a temporary fix, as someone building a life here? Cole's heart hammered, asked if she meant that. Natalie said she'd never been more terrified or more certain of anything. She'd walked away from Seattle, from the company, from everything she'd built. She could keep walking, or she could stop here. Plant roots, build something new. With him, if he wanted that. Cole wanted it so badly it scared him. But wanting wasn't enough. He had a daughter to protect. Had to be sure. He said they should take it slow. No promises yet. Just see where it went. Natalie nodded, said she could do slow. Cole leaned in, kissed her, soft and careful and full of possibility. When they pulled apart, Natalie was smiling, said that didn't feel very slow. Cole laughed, said they'd work on it. Ruby's surgery was scheduled for Thursday morning at Denver Children's Hospital. Cole marked the days on the calendar like a countdown, each one bringing him closer to a terror he couldn't name. The device they'd implant was smaller than a pack of gum, the surgeon had said. Would regulate her heartbeat, prevent the arrhythmias that could kill her. Simple procedure, good prognosis, she'd be home in 2 days. Cole had heard similar optimism 3 years ago, right before Julia's cancer stopped responding to treatment. Natalie showed up at 6 in the morning, coffee in hand. She'd offered to drive them. Cole had accepted because the thought of white-knuckling the steering wheel for 2 hours while Ruby sat in the back seemed unbearable. The drive passed in fragments. Ruby asking questions about the surgery, Natalie answering with medical precision, softened by kindness. Cole watching the Rockies slide past, trying not to calculate odds. Brooke had promised to handle the garage. The community had donated $19,000 through a fundraiser Cole didn't know about until Martha presented him with the check. Between that and Natalie's investment, they'd cover Ruby's surgery with breathing room left over. Except breathing room didn't mean anything if Ruby didn't wake up. They reached the hospital at 8. Registration pre-op nurses who smiled too much and spoke in voices reserved for frightened children and their parents. Ruby was brave until they wheeled her back, then her hand clutched Cole's and her voice got small, asking if he'd be there when she woke up. Cole promised, the same promise he'd made 1,000 times, the one he'd keep until he couldn't anymore. They took her through doors Cole couldn't follow. He stood in the hallway watching until she disappeared, then found the nearest wall and leaned against it. His lungs felt too small for his ribs. Natalie's hand found his, anchoring him to the present. She didn't say it would be okay, didn't offer false comfort, just stood there while Cole fought to hold himself together. The waiting room held other parents wearing the same expression. Fear wrapped in forced calm, hope tangled with dread. Cole couldn't sit. Paced circuits around the room, checking his phone every 30 seconds, even though the nurse said surgery would take 3 hours minimum. Natalie sat with her laptop working, or pretending to work. Cole recognized the way her fingers hovered over keys without typing. An hour and his phone rang. Brooke. Apologetic but urgent. Thorne's lawyers had shown up at the garage with an eviction notice, claiming Cole had violated lease terms through criminal activity, specifically the vandalism. Never mind that Cole was the victim, they were demanding he vacate within 30 days or face legal action. Cole's vision narrowed. Asked Brooke to handle it. Couldn't deal with Thorne's games while Ruby was in surgery. Brooke said he'd already called their lawyer, just wanted Cole to know. Cole hung up, dropped into a chair, wondered how much more could pile on before he broke completely. Natalie looked up from her laptop, asked what happened. Cole told her. About the eviction notice, about Thorne escalating, about feeling like he was drowning while trying to save his daughter. Natalie's expression hardened. She made a call, voice crisp and professional, asked whoever answered to pull records on Thornton Caldwell. Property acquisitions, business dealings, legal history, everything public and some things that weren't. She'd paid double the usual rate for speed, ended the call, told Cole she'd hired an investigator. Former FBI specialized in corporate corruption. If Thorne had skeletons, they'd find them. Cole asked what that would cost. Natalie waved it off, said money was the one thing she had in surplus, might as well use it for something that mattered. 2 hours crawled past. 3. A nurse appeared smiling, saying the surgery went perfectly. Ruby was in recovery. They could see her in 20 minutes. The relief hit Cole like a physical blow. His knees buckled. Natalie caught his elbow, steadied him. They followed the nurse to recovery. Ruby lay in a bed too big for her small frame, monitors beeping steady rhythm. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell, mechanical and beautiful. Cole took her hand, felt warmth, felt pulse. Alive. Ruby's eyes fluttered open, groggy but present, asked if it was over. Cole said yes, baby, it was over. She'd been so brave. Ruby's smile was soft with medication, asked if Natalie was still there. Natalie stepped closer, said she wouldn't leave. Ruby's eyes closed again, sleep dragging her back under, but her hands squeezed Cole's before she went. They stayed until visiting hours ended, came back the next morning and every hour allowed after. Ruby recovered faster than the doctors predicted. 2 days became one, then she was cleared to go home, walking carefully, tender but intact. The drive back to Maple Ridge felt different than the drive out. Cole kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Ruby sleep, confirming she was still breathing. Natalie drove, letting him have the luxury of worry. They got home to find the house decorated. Welcome home banner balloons, Clara and Martha and Brooke in the kitchen, making dinner. Ruby's face lit up. She was passed from hug to hug, treated like the hero she'd been. Later, after everyone left, after Ruby was asleep in her own bed, with strict instructions to rest, Cole and Natalie sat on the porch. The routine they'd fallen into without deciding to. Cole said thank you for everything. The money, the support, the driving, the being there. He didn't have words for what it meant. Natalie said he didn't need words. They were partners now. This was what that looked like. Cole turned to face her. Partners in the garage, yeah. But what were they beyond that? They'd been living in this undefined space for 6 weeks. Dancing around labels, taking it slow. Except slow was a lie when she was at his house every night, when Ruby asked if Natalie was staying for breakfast, when Cole couldn't imagine days without her in them. He asked what she wanted this to be. Natalie's answer came soft. She wanted whatever he could give. Wanted to build something real. Wanted to wake up here and not feel like she was visiting. Wanted Ruby in the garage, in this porch, and him. But she'd understand if he wasn't ready. If losing Julia was too recent, if the risk was too high, she'd wait, or she'd stay as just a friend, whatever he needed. Cole kissed her answer, deeper than before, no hesitation left. Pulled back enough to say he was terrified. Terrified of losing someone again, terrified of Ruby's heart breaking if this didn't work, terrified of wanting something this much. But he wanted her, wanted this, wanted to stop being careful and just live. Natalie's smile broke like dawn, said terrified was okay. They could be terrified together. They went inside. Cole checked on Ruby one more time. Found her awake, watching them from the hallway. She asked if Natalie was Daddy's girlfriend now. Cole crouched down. Said, yeah, kiddo, if that was okay with Ruby. Ruby considered this with the gravity of someone holding veto power. Asked if that meant Natalie would be around more. Cole said probably yes. Ruby nodded. Said she liked Natalie. Liked when she helped with rockets. Liked how she explained things without being condescending. Liked how she made Daddy smile. Then quieter asked if this meant Natalie would leave like Mommy did, because Ruby didn't think she could handle losing someone else. The words hit Cole like a fist. He pulled his daughter close, told her nobody could promise forever. Mommy's leaving wasn't a choice, was something that happened to all of them. But Natalie was choosing to stay, choosing them. And sometimes you had to trust that choice even when it scared you. Ruby pulled back, looked at Natalie still standing in the doorway, asked if that was true, if Natalie was choosing them. Natalie knelt down to Ruby's level, said she'd never been more certain of anything. She wasn't replacing Ruby's mom. Nobody could. But she wanted to be part of this family if Ruby would let her. Ruby studied her face, looking for lies, for cracks, for the 1,000 ways adults failed children. Finally nodded, said okay. But Natalie had to promise to stay. Really promise. Natalie promised. Ruby accepted it, hugged Natalie brief and fierce, went back to bed. Cole and Natalie stood in the hallway, breathing through the weight of what just happened. The commitment made, the trust extended. The family beginning to reshape itself around new configurations. The investigators' report arrived Friday. 140 pages documenting Thorne Caldwell's business practices. Property acquisitions that smelled of intimidation, legal threats used as weapons, 3 ongoing lawsuits from previous landowners claiming harassment. Nothing prosecutable, but plenty damaging if made public. Natalie read it twice, made notes, built a strategy. Monday morning, she walked into Thorne's office without appointment. His secretary tried to stop her. Natalie smiled and kept walking, found Thorne on a phone call, cut it short by sitting down across from him. Thorne's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance, asked what she thought she was doing. Natalie slid a folder across his desk, told him to read it. Thorne opened the folder. His face went carefully neutral as he scanned pages. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. Asked where she'd gotten this information. Natalie said it didn't matter. What mattered was she had it. Had documentation of his methods, witness statements, legal history. Had enough to make his life very expensive if she wanted. She didn't want to. Wanted to offer a deal instead. Thorne leaned back, said he was listening. Natalie outlined terms. Thorne would withdraw all legal action against Cole, would cease any attempts to acquire the garage property, would leave them alone permanently. In exchange, Natalie would keep the report private, wouldn't send copies to the Business Journal, the state licensing board, his current investors. Thorne asked what stopped her from releasing it anyway once he backed off. Natalie's smile was cold, said she'd sign an NDA, legal agreement binding her to silence, as long as Thorne honored his end. But if he violated terms, if he came after Cole or the garage again, she'd burn him down. She had resources, had time, had motivation. The question was whether he wanted to test her. Neither spoke for a moment. Thorne's fingers drummed on the desk, calculation happening behind his eyes. He said she'd made her point, asked for 24 hours to review terms with his lawyers. Natalie said he had 12. After that, she'd assume the answer was no and proceed accordingly. Left his office without waiting for response. Thorne called 8 hours later, agreed to terms. His lawyers would draft the agreements. They'd sign by end of week. Cole didn't believe it until the papers were executed, notarized, filed. Even then, some part of him waited for the other shoe to drop. But days passed into weeks, and Thorne stayed silent. The eviction notice was withdrawn. The pressure lifted. The garage started to breathe again. Spring arrived properly. Colorado's sun, burning off snow, green pushing through brown. Ruby's strength returned. The scar on her chest faded pink. She went back to school, back to her rockets, back to being 7 and fearless. Natalie's month-to-month rental at Clara's B&B became 2 months, then 3. She'd essentially moved into Cole's house without official declaration. Toothbrush in the bathroom, clothes in the closet, her laptop permanently set up at the kitchen table. Ruby started calling her Nat, the nickname emerging naturally. They didn't discuss it, just let it happen. The garage expanded. Word spread about the new partner who'd brought organization and efficiency. Customers started coming from farther out. Brooke hired an apprentice mechanic. They were booking 2 weeks out, sometimes 3. Not rich, but stable. Solvent. Cole paid down debt. Slowly, painfully slowly, but the number decreased. One evening in late May, Ruby asked if they could go back to Mountain Summit Resort. Not because anything was wrong, because she wanted to see where Daddy and Natalie first met, wanted to understand how her family had changed. Cole looked at Natalie. She shrugged, smiled, said why not? They drove up on a Saturday, Ruby in the back seat narrating everything she saw, pointing out landmarks Cole barely remembered from that night. The resort appeared familiar and foreign. Same building, different context. They got the same suite. 412. Ruby was delighted by the symmetry, ran from room to room declaring which one she wanted. Settled on the smaller bedroom, said the adults could have the big one. Cole and Natalie stood in that bedroom remembering. The fireplace where they'd talked until dawn. The window where they'd watched the storm. The couch where everything shifted. Ruby called from the other room. Wanted to order room service. Wanted to swim in the pool. Wanted to do all the things she imagined rich people did. They indulged her. Pizza and swimming and staying up late watching movies. Ruby fell asleep between them on the couch, exhausted and happy. Cole carried her to bed, tucked her in, came back to find Natalie at the window. Same position as that first night, but everything else different. He asked what she was thinking about. She said she'd been terrified that night. Whole life collapsing, no idea what came next. If someone had told her she'd end up here, partnered with a mechanic in a town she'd never heard of, falling in love with a widower and his daughter, she'd have thought they were insane. But this was the happiest she'd ever been, the most herself, the most at peace. She turned to face him, asked if he felt the same. Cole said he'd been terrified too, drowning in debt and grief, trying to be enough for Ruby, failing constantly. If someone had told him a storm would bring him a partner who'd save his business and his daughter and somehow fit into their broken family like she'd always belonged, he wouldn't have believed it. But here they were. And yeah, he was happy, more than he'd thought possible after Julia. He pulled out a small box, hands shaking slightly, said he'd been carrying it for 2 weeks waiting for the right moment, asked if Natalie would marry him. The question hung in the air. Natalie's eyes went wide. She looked at the ring, simple silver band, nothing extravagant. Looked at Cole's face, hope and fear mixing. Her voice came out shaky, asked if he was serious. Cole said he'd never been more serious. He knew it was fast, knew they'd only been together 4 months. but he also knew what he wanted. Wanted her in his life permanently. Wanted Ruby to have the stability of family. Wanted to stop pretending this was temporary. Wanted Natalie to be his wife if she'd have him. Natalie's answer was yes before he finished asking. Yes and yes and yes. She'd marry him, would build a life here, would be Ruby's stepmother and Cole's partner in everything. He slid the ring on her finger, kissed her while the mountains watched through windows. Ruby's voice interrupted from the hallway, asking if they were kissing, because that's what people did when they got engaged. They broke apart. Ruby stood there in her pajamas, knowing smile on her face. Cole asked how long she'd been awake. Ruby said long enough, asked if this meant Natalie was staying forever. Natalie knelt down, said yes if that was okay with Ruby. Ruby pretended to think about it, then grinned, said it was more than okay, said she'd been hoping, asked if she could be in the wedding. Cole said of course. She could be whatever she wanted. Ruby declared she wanted to be Flower Girl, but also wanted to wear something with rockets on it because this was a space-age family now. Natalie promised they'd figure it out. They told people the next week. Brooke whooped and picked Natalie up in a hug that made her laugh. Martha cried and said she'd known from the start. Clara claimed she'd orchestrated the whole thing by giving Natalie the room with the mountain view. Ruby told everyone at school she was getting a bonus mom, started planning the wedding with detailed seriousness, insisted on a rocket theme, drew designs for a dress that would have made NASA proud. Natalie's old world intruded once. Her father called. Richard Montgomery, who hadn't spoken to her in 8 months, who'd heard through business channels that his daughter was engaged to a mechanic in Colorado. His voice was cold, asked if she'd lost her mind. Thrown away her career, her company, her potential for what small-town domesticity? Natalie's answer was calm, said she'd found something worth more than the company, worth more than money or prestige. She'd found a life that fit. Richard said she was wasting her potential. Natalie said potential without happiness was just suffering with better PR. She was done suffering to meet someone else's expectations. Richard hung up. Natalie stood holding the phone, breathing through old wounds reopening. Cole asked if she was okay. She said yeah. Said goodbye felt different than she'd expected. Lighter. Like releasing weight she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. They set the wedding for September. Small ceremony, backyard of Cole's house. Ruby insisted on helping plan everything. Wanted sunflowers because they were bright. Wanted a cake that looked like a rocket ship. Wanted everyone to wear something blue because that was the color of Earth from space, and Earth was where they all lived together now. Summer passed in preparation. Natalie officially moved in, giving up the B&B room that had stopped being home months ago, her things mixed with theirs. Her books on the shelves, her coffee mug in the cabinet, her life woven into the fabric of theirs, until the seams disappeared. The garage thrived. They hired a second mechanic, then a third. Brooke became full partner. Natalie handled the business side, let Cole focus on the work he loved. They were profitable for the first time in 5 years. Ruby started 3rd grade, told her new teacher she had 2 moms now, one in heaven, one at home. The teacher asked if that was confusing. Ruby said no. Love wasn't a limited resource. Having more people to love just meant more love total. September arrived golden perfect. The wedding day dawned clear, Colorado sky, endless blue. Ruby woke Cole at dawn, too excited to sleep. Her dress had subtle rocket patterns embroidered in silver thread, compromised between her space dreams and wedding appropriate. She looked beautiful and strange and entirely herself. Guests arrived at 2, 80 people, mostly from town. Clara brought 3 casseroles because she couldn't help herself. Brooke was best man, wore a suit that probably hadn't seen daylight in a decade. Martha cried before the ceremony even started. Natalie appeared in a simple dress, no veil, no train. She didn't need armor anymore. Just herself walking toward Cole with a smile that said she'd finally found home. Ruby walked ahead carrying flowers, solemn with responsibility. When she reached Cole, she whispered, asking if he was nervous. Cole admitted he was. Ruby said that was okay. Nervous just meant it mattered. The ceremony was brief, standard vows modified slightly. Natalie promised to love Cole and Ruby, to build a life with them, to stay even when it was hard. Cole promised the same, to honor what they were creating, to be present, to choose them every day. Ruby had asked to speak, stood between them reading from a paper she'd written carefully. Her voice was clear. She said when Mommy was sick, Mommy told her Daddy would be sad for a while. But Mommy said he'd find someone new and Ruby should help him be happy. Mommy said to make sure the person was kind and smart and made him laugh. Natalie was all those things. Plus she knew about rockets and didn't talk down to kids and made the best pancakes besides Daddy. She wasn't replacing Mom. Mom was always going to be Ruby's first mom in her heart and memories. But Natalie was her now mom. Her here mom. Her mom who helped with homework and explained orbital mechanics and promised to stay. Ruby said she loved them both, her mom in heaven and her mom here. And she thought the first mom would be happy the second mom was taking care of Daddy and Ruby. The crowd was crying, Cole was crying, Natalie was crying. Ruby looked satisfied with the emotional devastation she'd caused. The officiant pronounced them married. Cole kissed his wife. Ruby cheered louder than anyone. The reception was everything Ruby wanted. Dancing on grass cake that did indeed look like a rocket, people celebrating a family that had rebuilt itself from grief into something new. Late in the evening when most guests had left, Cole found Ruby sitting on the porch steps. She was holding a photo of Julia, the one from her nightstand. Cole sat beside her, asked if she was okay. Ruby nodded, said she just wanted Mom to see, wanted her to know they were happy, that Daddy found someone good, that Ruby was okay. Cole's throat tightened, said Mom knew. Wherever she was, she knew. Ruby leaned against him, asked if it was okay to love Natalie and still miss Mom. Cole said it wasn't just okay, it was exactly right. Love didn't replace love, it added. Natalie didn't erase Mom, she was just another person in Ruby's life to love. And that was good. That was how it should be. Ruby accepted on this, stood up, hugged Cole, started to go inside, then turned back, asked one more question. If love kept adding, if people kept staying, would their family keep getting bigger? Not just the three of them, but maybe more. Someday Cole understood what she was asking. If there might be brothers or sisters, if this new family might grow beyond what they'd started with. He said maybe. Someday. If that's what happened. Would Ruby be okay with that? Ruby's smile was enormous. Said she'd be the best big sister ever. Because she'd learned from the best people how to love someone new without forgetting who came before. She went inside. Cole sat alone with Julia's photo, whispered thank you for the years they'd had, for Ruby, for giving him permission to be happy again, for understanding that moving forward didn't mean leaving her behind. Set the photo down gently, stood up, looked at his house, warm light spilling from windows, his wife and daughter inside waiting for him. This was his life now, built from fragments and choices in a storm that brought exactly what he needed when he'd stopped believing he deserved it. He went inside, found Natalie and Ruby building a model rocket at the kitchen table, pieces scattered everywhere, both of them laughing at some joke he'd missed. They looked up when he entered, made space for him at the table, handed him parts to hold. Included him like he'd always been there, like he'd always be there, like this was how families worked when they chose each other instead of just inheriting connection. Cole sat down, picked up a piece Ruby handed him, watched Natalie explain something technical while Ruby listened with absolute focus. Thought about how a year ago he'd been drowning. 6 months ago he'd been terrified. 3 months ago he'd been hoping. Now he was just here, present, part of something bigger than survival. Part of a family that had built itself from broken pieces into something whole. The rocket took shape under their hands. Ruby declared it would go higher than any they'd built before. Natalie said they'd need better fuel mixture. Cole suggested modifications to the fins. They worked together until Ruby's bedtime. Tucked her in together, both of them, kissing her goodnight. Turned off her light and stood in the hallway listening to her breathe. Natalie took Cole's hand, led him to their bedroom. Their room now, their house, their life. They lay in bed holding each other. Outside, stars wheeled overhead. Inside, family breathed steady. Cole said he'd been thinking about Ruby's question, about growing their family, about whether Natalie wanted that too. Natalie was quiet for a moment, then said she'd never imagined herself as a mother, had spent so long focused on the company she'd never considered it. But watching Ruby being part of her life, she discovered something unexpected. She was good at this. Good at being present for a child who needed her. And yeah, maybe she wanted to do it again. Build something from the beginning this time. Give Ruby a sibling, give themselves a child who was theirs from the start. Cole felt something expand in his chest. Not pressure this time, space, room for more love, more life, more possibility. He said, okay then, someday, when the time was right. They'd grow this family they were building. Natalie kissed him. Agreement and promise and future all mixed together. They fell asleep tangled together. The life Cole never planned for. The happiness he'd stopped believing in. The second chance he didn't know to ask for. And in the morning when Ruby climbed into bed between them, asking what they were making for breakfast, when Natalie suggested pancakes and Ruby demanded chocolate chips, and Cole said he'd make them extra fluffy, when they all stumbled to the kitchen together, rumpled and happy and whole, this was the life that mattered. Not the one he'd lost, not the one he'd imagined. This one, built from choosing each other, from showing up, from being brave enough to love again, when love had already broken his heart once. This was success, not money or prestige or what looked good on paper. Just this. Morning light through kitchen windows, a daughter who felt safe enough to demand chocolate chips, a wife who fit like she'd always belonged, a family assembled from grief and chance and the simple decision to try. Cole flipped pancakes while Ruby and Natalie set the table. Watched them work together, the ease of established routine. Thought about storms and choices and the thousand small moments that added up to a life worth living. And when they sat down to eat, when Ruby said grace and thanked the universe for bonus moms and rocket fuel and chocolate chips, when Natalie caught his eye and smiled like she knew exactly what he was thinking. His daughter and his wife and his second chance at happiness were all gathered in one place. Cole understood something he hadn't before. You don't get the life you planned. You get the life you build from what remains after the plan falls apart. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you're willing to risk your heart one more time, what you build might be better than anything you imagined. This was better. This was everything. This was home.